Hello, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live program as we explore reducing, reusing, and tracking the future of sustainable asset management and, of course, best practices in supply chain. Brought to you by my friends at the Antares Vision Group, real experts in supply chain and technology. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Bill Wall, and I've worked in the enterprise software and data space for more than 20 years, and I'm ever fascinated by the intersection of business and technology. No matter what industry you work in, managing materials and the carriers that transport materials is mission critical for supply chain management. I've been fortunate to cover the latest in technology deployed to address these critical issues out at the edge and into the core of ERP solutions, and it continues to amaze me how best practices in supply chain can be addressed across industries. Today, we'll dig into the sustainable asset management topic with a focus on returnables and some additional benefits from this perspective for your overall management of the supply chain. Today's conversation is also an interactive one, and I encourage you in the audience who have joined us today to participate. Use today's webinar platform on LinkedIn to do a couple of things. Enter your name and title, let us know where you're located so we get a sense of who's joining, and use that same location to add comments, post any questions, and we'll try to address them, or at least some of them, as we go through our program today during our time together. My most productive conversations have been with my friends at Axis, now part of the Antares Vision Group. So it's my pleasure to welcome a regular guest of mine, Chief Strategy Officer John DiPaolo, to the program. John, so good to talk with you again, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too, Bill. Great to see you on this December day. Looking forward to the conversation today.
As always, today's topic is, again, we've talking returnable asset management. I know you gave a presentation recently about this in Chicago at PAC Expo, a great show to go to if you're in this space. And you've discussed returnables together with me a few times, but we want to sort of look at sustainable assets management. What do you really mean when you talk about sustainability in this area?
You know, Bill, it's interesting because you can really look at sustainability from a couple of different angles, right? Obviously, if you are reusing packaging, the more you can reuse it, the less waste there is, the less things going to landfills, the less burden that you put on your customers, right? That's an obvious benefit from a sustainability perspective. But really, kind of some of the other areas that we can think about is when you have returnable assets that are kind of built for purpose for moving products, your chances of damaging those products are much lower, right? So you're not reshipping things to fix damaged products, as an example. You're lowering your carbon footprint by not having as much, disposable or one-way packaging shipped to your location, right?
Right.
And then if you think about it also from your customer side, and just to use an example, every cardboard box that you ship to a customer needs to be disposed of on their end, right? So now it's kind of all of these different things that you can start to really add up a sustainability issue around returnable packaging, but also you're protecting what's in those assets, and potentially improving customer satisfaction scores and lowering the amount of transportation costs and rush shipments and things like that. Because never have somebody who received a damaged shipment say, well, you can ship that to me whenever you feel like it, right? So there's a lot of angles to the sustainability area that you can incorporate, as well as a lot of operational and bottom line benefits.
I know that if you look at sort of the geopolitics of the world of business today, sometimes sustainability can get a sort of bad name, but we're actually really talking about hard benefits and hard costs associated with this topic, like product loss, like meeting particular carbon reduction goals and so forth. This is not just a soft, nice topic. This has hard benefits for those that are managing their supply chains, right?
Right. Absolutely. And even thinking about, kind of what's the predictability of, as you're moving product through your supply chain, as you start to reuse things and as you start to look at different angles of leveraging that information, can you have a more collaborative relationship with your customer? Because if you're shipping them an asset that you're expecting to get back, you have an understanding as to how they're going to use that asset, right? You can standardize on how you ship items. You can standardize on the way that you ship things. So there again, the the sustainability angle is a good umbrella, because the other thing that the sustainability angle does is it gets other people involved in the project that maybe you didn't think of before, right? Or other stakeholders that would like to get those benefits of not only the reusable side, but also working, kind of on other initiatives that they may be interested in.
Lots of places to go in this conversation. So I thought maybe we'd sort of start high at a strategic level, looking at the presentation you gave at Pack Expo in Chicago. You talked about managing risk in the supply chain. What do you mean about risk in the supply chain, and how does that relate to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, the risk management side of the supply chain, really is, can I look downstream, to my customers or my customers' customers, and ensure that the product quality that I have in my manufacturing goes all the way through the supply chain, right? So when we look at minimizing, risk of damage from transportation, when we look at environmental risk, right? So if you think about it, in a reusable scenario, and let's just take cold chain as an example, right? Where I'm shipping product, that has the potential, of spoilage or something along those lines. Well, if I'm using returnables, I can start to outfit those returnables with various sensors and alert mechanisms today with the technology that allows me to proactively identify if there's a problem, with product moving through my supply chain. We look at just now the collection of recalls that we've seen, across, different industries and things like that. And could some of that have been mitigated, by the ability to track not only the status of items, but, kind of where they are in real time. So if there is an adverse supply chain event, can I notify and proactively act on that, because, I'm getting information back not only about my product, but the containers that carry those products can now be outfitted with additional technology in order to allow me to track them better.
One of the words that stood out for me in the Pack Expo presentation was randomness, and the particular role it may play in risk in supply chain. When you talk about randomness in supply chain, what do you mean?
I think it's a couple of different things, right? So if I have, packaging that's not always consistent, kind of flowing through on different carriers and things like that, there's a certain level of potential random risk involved in that. So this standardization capability that allows me to say, okay, every time I ship a particular product, it's going to be packed in this way, in this type of a container, with these data elements and context that surround that. It eliminates some of that randomness, right? And then the other thing is, because I can now afford to be protecting the product that I'm shipping in a more proactive way, I'm assured with a much greater degree of confidence that the product's going to arrive in the same condition that I sent it, right? So random incidents happen in the supply chain.
This would be similar to the way some people think about creating standardized business process. If you do things the same way each time, you reduce the risk that it gets done in a way that's disruptive because it's outside the normal business process. That's a way to think about
it. It is. And then if I can also standardize how my product looks coming to customers, regardless of where it's shipped from, right?
Right.
That certainly helps as well, because then I know that my customers can count on that level of consistency, regardless of what manufacturing location it came from or what distribution location it came from, or if in fact I use contract manufacturing or contract packaging and I can get them into that same way of thinking, again, it harmonizes, my products across the supply chain.
So minimizing randomness is a strong leading indicator of minimizing risk. That's the strategic message there.
It certainly is. If we do things the same way every time, and that method works, then moving that method out, kind of across my entire landscape, lowers the risk that something is going to happen.
So let's build on that theme a little bit, because one of the things that's always struck me about enterprise software topics like supply chain is that, across dozens of different industries, which are very different, there are common best practices that minimize risk, that standardize process, look and feel, reduce risk. In a previous program, you and I had an interesting conversation about returnables, and that was the cable reel industry. And what made that industry very unique is that these large reels, these large wooden and sometimes metal and sometimes plastic reels, they're pretty expensive returnable asset. Not every returnable asset carries that kind of capital cost. But if we think generally about sustainability and returnables, what are some of the industries that really this topic comes to prominence?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. So, obviously, when we think about the chemical industry, right, in, liquid, gas and other chemicals that get shipped kind of through the supply chain, and not necessarily the bulk chemical industry, but more specialty, right? Certainly that comes into play, because obviously you can't ship chemicals without something to put it in, and managing that, is important. We're starting to see it more and more in food, right? Where we're having a level of consistency in returnables. We see it in baked goods a lot, obviously, in customers that we're working with, kind of in the bakery industry, the ubiquitous bakery tray, kind of going out into the supply chain. Again, not a high value returnable, but there are a lot of them, right? So the capital costs for these type of companies, certainly are high. And then obviously in the automotive space, they've been working for quite some time with specialized racks and other holders to move product through the supply chain. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from these large adopters of returnable asset, and how they're leveraging the information. Although I still think a lot of that is in its infancy of what we can do with the information.
Right. If you talk about the downstream impact on customers and their customers, certainly one of the things that people talk about with returnables is the work that downstream has to be done to handle the returnables, hold them until it's time to ship them, and then to ship them. So if we think about it from a sustainability perspective, it's really about making that process efficient as possible for the downstream site that has to deal with the returnables.
Correct. And when you think about it, and it's like all projects, the very start of it can be a little bit daunting, right? So if I'm shipping everything today in corrugate, and it arrives on a pallet stretch wrapped in corrugate, and then I tell all of my customers, listen, I'm going to be switching to a returnable strategy, and you're going to have to manage the storage of those returnables for a period of time, and we're going to orchestrate a return policy and things like that. That can be a bit of a challenge, right? But I think one of the things that companies can do is really think about it in how can I collaborate better with my customers, right? So if I have a returnable or a group of returnables that I'm shipping that has product in it, and I can work with my customer on the tracking of that returnable, by definition, I start to understand what their supply chain usage is a little bit better, right? So now can I work with them on ensuring that if we utilize the returnable as a proxy for the movement of product, can I always ensure that you're in stock with my product at all periods in time? Because we can set up this feedback loop that lets me know as you're consuming things that I can reorder automatically for you, right? So I get that collaborative process. I give my customers something less to worry about, and they get to participate in the sustainability side because now they're not stuck with tons of corrugate that they now have to dispose of, right? So there are benefits for both sides.
Yep. I see lots of places to explore there in this collaborative relationship, and it's always great to see people pose questions. So hello to the folks that are posting comments on the site. If you have a question for John and want to have something addressed in this conversation, by all means, put that up in the stream. So hello to the listener from Eastern Europe and Sophia. One of the questions that gets asked, John, is how much in the sustainability topic does the pressure come from downstream, upstream? Do you have customers saying, look, I have a sustainability goal at my plant. I don't want to throw out your carriers. Can you reshape your supply chain to do reusables because the waste that you're creating is impacting my sustainability goals at that end? Does this work with pressure from the edge back to the center?
I mean, in all honesty, I don't think we're seeing a lot of that quite yet. But I think it's something to be thought about, right? And, again, it goes back to that collaborative nature, right? Around, is it time to start reaching out to your customers to say, how can I fit better in your sustainability requirements? And here's an idea that I have, which will benefit both of us, from a sustainability side, but also will benefit both of us from a quality management side, and the ability that you can always count on product coming in the way that you're anticipating it.
Your answer there sort of is a nice segue to a question I was going to ask. Traditionally, our listeners on this program tend to be supply chain management leaders and experts and implementers. But if you get into this collaborative relationship with customers and their customers, there are some other roles, job roles in the scenario that pop in. You just mentioned quality managers as one of them. What are some of the other roles that start to touch this process if you think about supply chain from a sustainability and returnables perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different personas that can benefit from this, right? So if I think about, and we'll come back to quality, but if I think about plant manager, right? So if I'm a plant manager and I rely on returnables to run production, do I have enough? Where are they? If I don't have enough, how can I get them, right? And the traditional answer for that, and we do a lot of work in the chemical space, so, we can reference back to that. The traditional answer to that is, well, go buy more, and then we'll put them somewhere, right? And a lot of that is because in many cases, it's an unmanaged asset. It's on the books, it's hit the balance sheet, you bought them, but it doesn't have a life cycle to it, right? So when I run into a problem, my immediate reaction is to go, well, let me go buy some more of those, and then I can package my product. And in a more managed scenario, I can start to pull either additional company locations that may have an excess of returnable assets, or I can work on, fleet balancing and fleet management, which is a big part of the solutions that we work with, to make sure that you have the right components at the right point in time, and that the returnable gets treated just like any other item on the bill of materials in order to make sure that you can transfer that out. When I think about QA, QA is certainly an interesting one, and it brings a whole different group in. But if I'm a QA manager and I have to deal with supplier scorecards and making sure that, I'm providing the best possible service for my downstream customers, this way of shipping, as we spoke about it earlier in today's call, allows me to work, much more on the fact that when products show up, they will be correct. Because they're packaged a certain way in a certain configuration, and it's very dependable and it's very predictable. And it's one less thing I have to worry about from a quality management perspective. And then from a production planner, you kind of have the best of both worlds, right? So if I'm a production planner and I'm planning production for, a certain plant or a grouping of plants, and I incorporate that returnable process into that, I'm assured that the production runs that I'm doing at least have a place to go. So there's a lot of different personas that you can kind of bring into the mix, which also helps out in project kickoffs and helps out in project budgeting and other things, because, we have to be honest, these returnables are not free, right? It's a change in process. And we have to think about how I can best do that and get the most return for my investment.
I'm always fascinated about supply chain, maybe because when I first started at SAP 24 years ago, I worked on supply chain as the first area of focus. And I've watched it continue to evolve. I can remember back in the beginning, the business process of supply chain management was about, how do I get the product out to the customer? And then we started to get the infiltration of scanning and monitoring and ultimately devices on the products, RFID or whatever, and tagging that gave us more information throughout the life cycle of the supply chain. When you start to talk about returnables, now you're getting to an even further portion of the life cycle of the supply chain where you can gather information. And from the beginning, I've always watched this as an optimization of the process. When we think about sustainability, we can talk about carbon footprints, we can talk about loss and waste management, but you're also discovering more insight about the supply chain. So you're doing good things from a sustainability perspective, but that's creating data and insight through another portion of the supply chain, and you're getting more end to end. Is that a way to think about this as another opportunity for optimizing?
Yeah, there's no question about that. And in your question, Bill, as often it was multiple layers, right? So let's unpack that just a little bit. A barrier, that we've seen in the past to getting very robust data, for the movement of product is cost, right? So
Right.
as an example, you bring up the RFID topic. Now, RFID has become much less expensive, as we've kind of gone through, the more ubiquitous nature of it in retail, as an
Hmm.
example, but it's still a cost. But if I can RFID enable my returnables, as an example, right? That gives you a way of amortizing the cost over multiple uses. And it
Interesting.
also gives you that capability of this headless data collection where I can put in more read points through the process and get higher fidelity data so that I can really see the movement of my product, how it's working. And I've always kind of had this concept, which is getting borne out more and more, is that in every manufacturing and distribution process, there are these micro inefficiencies that you can't catch by just scanning it at shipment, as an example.
Hmm.
But with RFID and other technologies like vision systems and things like that, we can now put a whole lot more touch points and read points through the process and capture where all these micro inefficiencies are, and then build that back into your operational plan. So the payback again is multiplied because my operations are better, my cost of shipping is lower, and I can amortize the cost of that repetitive nature over a multi-use type of an approach.
If we go back to the term that you brought up earlier in the program about collaborative relationships with customers, this information flows not just to the original manufacturer who's doing the shipping and taking the returnables. You're now able to provide a level of detail, say, to that plant manager. Where are those products? How long before they get to the factory? How many of them are sitting in my inventory now? So that the benefits of information flow and optimization are running in sort of both directions. Is that what you mean by collaborative?
It is, and because we're working, kind of with standardized technologies now, if I wanted to read a RFID-enabled tote or cylinder or what have you at my customer location, that is fairly easy to do at this point because of the standards that are in place. It allows me now to share information more broadly, and easier. And with obviously things like the cloud coming in and being able to stand up additional partners across the supply chain, without a lot of infrastructure costs and without a lot of time, having those data carriers and being able to read those data carriers at multiple points again allows you to even extend that visibility further.
Do you find when you think about it from a sustainability perspective on returnables, are you winding up tracking at places you might not otherwise be thinking about tracking assets through the supply chain? Does it change the thinking on additional touch points where you're getting information?
Yeah, and I think you can start to look at that, and like a lot of the conversations that we've had, you want to start in a manner, that is manageable for you, but put in a technology that allows you to extend that further down.
Mhm.
So it does allow you to add additional touch points, additional read points, within the supply chain, and bring that information back in.
You talked at Pack Expo, and I've heard you use this term before about how supply chain can get additional context into how people operate their business process, irrespective of industries. What do you mean when you say additional context?
Yeah, it's going to vary a little bit, on what it is that you're actually moving, right? But the concept, and I've said this one before, of using the returnable as a proxy for the product that is in there, and then attaching
Right.
business context to that returnable so that you can understand what's in it. Does it have special handling conditions? When am I expecting it back? Do I have expiry issues? Kind of all of the things that would be good to know about that product can be then tied to that returnable. And the beauty of it is it's at a much more granular level, right? So if I'm shipping multiple products inside of a returnable that have different attributes about them, with the right system, you can load up all of that context data. And then when the returnable is scanned or read, everything about that is known. And it gives you a lot of very rich, robust information that you can then use for whatever reason you need. So, one of the reasons you may extend that down to your customers is so they can automatically receive what's in that returnable on a item returnable by returnable basis,
Hmm.
and really get a good handle as to how product is moving.
I know that Axis tends to come into projects from lots of different directions. Are you seeing uh, these projects bubble up because people have sustainability goals that they're trying to meet? Or is it more likely that they're trying to build in a returnables program in their supply chain, but they now can see the opportunity to have visibility to sustainability related issues? It's sort of like which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And it may not matter, but where do you see the project starting?
Yeah, so what we see a lot of, and again, it goes back to that kind of unmanaged process of returnables, right? So returnables become a capital expense, on the balance sheet that gets reordered on an annual basis at a level that doesn't make a lot of sense for companies if they really sit back and look at what their loss rate is.
Hmm.
So I think we see it from a capital reduction perspective, but
Right.
then if you get the right stakeholders involved, all of a sudden it becomes, well, we can use this for capital expense reduction. We can use it for sustainability initiatives. We can use it for quality initiatives. We can use it to plan out production better. So there's a lot of additional things that you can do. And if you do it right and not silo it out to, I'm just going to track my pallets or I'm just going to track my cylinders and leave that alone, it
Right.
becomes much more valuable to the organization the broader you use it.
Feels a little bit analogous to the comment you made earlier um, about some of the additional insights and benefits that you get from the project. And as we start to wrap up our program today, John, you and I often end our programs by talking about where to get started. But it seems to me that this sustainability topic provides a basis for helping to justify the investments by identifying the upsides. It was like the comment earlier about, well, listen, if you learn more information about where your products are, it can help offset the cost of tagging. The same thing's true here. I think I hear you saying the additional context and information you get can benefit you, your customer, and your customer's customer. And it provides a good, strong use case to justify the investments in this area. Is that the right way to think about how to get started?
Yeah, I think it is. And the other way to think about it is, kind of as you go down and start to think about a returnable asset program, how can you identify what early adopter customers that you can also work with, to work with them, gauge their interest, get their feedback on the process, make it easy for them. Because then what you're going to find is that I get all of the benefits of managing that internally, but I also have a couple reference customers that I can immediately point to that got benefit from the solution to use that to bring others into the program.
I know as we wrap up our program today, John, not only will the recording for this be available, that we can always count on you and the team there at Antares to provide downstream content to help people explore this issue. Ultimately, this is about creating the right collection of technology and process experts who have done this before, and to build a team that can support any project. And you've always, as a chief strategy officer, said, listen, don't boil the ocean, start small, get some wins, understand how those wins can make the process work and extend to other areas of your business. This is another place where that applies, right? You don't have to solve 100% at the beginning. If you're looking for a place to start, pick some projects where you can get some fast wins and demonstrate the benefit, and that will help people get to the sustainability topic that much faster. Is that the right way to think about it?
It absolutely is. And, it always reminds me of the 3 Ps of projects that I've always dealt with, which is, pilot becomes production and production becomes permanent. So think about that as you start to roll out these items, that this is something that you're going to want to put some thought behind, because you're going to be living with it for a while and you want to get the benefit.
Sounds great. John, as always, you're a great guest. Your expertise is appreciated by the audience, and it's always great to have a chance to have a conversation with you. Thank you for being on today.
Yes, thank you, Bill. It's great to see you, and happy holidays to you.
Same to you as well. Our thanks to John DiPaolo, Chief Strategy Officer at Antares Vision Group. You've known him from Axis, which is now a part of Antares. If you'd like to reach out to John or the great team at Antares, please use their LinkedIn accounts. It's a great way to follow John and the topics he talks about. More information about the Diamine family of supply chain solutions can be found at the Axis website, which you can see on your screen. And my thanks to the great team at Antares Vision Group for bringing us today's program. For that team and for John, I'm your host, Bill Wall. Please join the conversation online. Share the recording of this program, which will be posted on LinkedIn with your colleagues. And until next time, good day and happy holidays.